Definitely for today, our special guest, Iain Cameron from the University of Aberdeen, who is in the Aberdeen area rather than Edinburgh. So it is a multiple location shoot that we're doing at the moment. So perhaps you would like to introduce yourself, Iain, and let us know what you do at the University of Aberdeen.
Thanks, Martin. Good afternoon. So within the University of Aberdeen's Digital Directorate, I am User Services Manager. What that means is I look after the IT service desk, training and documentation team, an assistive technology team, and a learner's toolkit team. But I think fundamentally for the chat today, it's mostly about my role as the IT service desk manager. Do I have to answer the question about what my first computer was?
Go on.
A ZX81 and then a ZX Spectrum. That ages me.
That ages me as well. And do you know, one of the reasons for asking that question is that I can gauge the age of people who are on the stream. So if they say that their first computer was a Chromebook or MacBook Air or something like that, then I'm going to say, whoa, I need to adjust my stream slightly for a younger audience because they were born before the ZX81 was out. So
I think my fingers still suffer from playing Daley Thompson's Decathlon and battering the keys very hard. But
I think I still suffer from remembering trying to upload games with a tape drive, which was particularly torturous. ZX81, I think, ZX Spectrum, VIC-20, and so on and so forth, I think. But here we are, a long time later, and we're today going to be talking about single student records. So let's transition into a view of that, and I'll give a bit of a breakdown. So a couple of years ago, I started to look at the whole single student record thing, and I was fairly frightened by the whole prospect, actually. But as time's gone by, Freshworks in particular have produced some new products, which I think help, and I'm sure other people have got similar product sets which help. But from my perspective, the bit that I particularly liked was that on the prospecting side of things, so what I'm terming a prospect is before a student actually joins the university, when they make contact with the university and log on to a screen somewhere, a website, we can track behavior on the website, ping stuff up, which starts to engage with the student, get them involved in various campaigns for social media, for WhatsApp, for whatever it is, measure all of that stuff going on and create what we call sales journey paths for the students dependent upon their behavior and responses. And we can collate all of that information in a lovely record, which would be great if we could just then take that and pass it from what I'm terming the prospecting stage over to the student stage. So I would be interested, for those of you watching this on catch up, to understand what you're using for this front end side of the process before the student becomes an actual member of your organization. So I don't actually know what you use at this front end, and I don't know if you do either, because you really don't join in until the student has a registered Aberdeen University email, I guess.
Yeah, correct. We've got a number of Microsoft Dynamics systems that are used to capture the applicants and then the live actual students, and then they go into custom built. We've got a custom built student record system that's pretty old, almost as old as the ZX Spectrum. I'm not joking.
I am genuinely interested to know what people do at that front end, because I know a lot of people are using Salesforce as well, which seems, well, it's an expensive tool and it's high maintenance. I've seen some brilliant examples of Salesforce implemented and some awful ones as well. So I will be interested to understand what's going on at that front end. And from a Freshworks perspective, that's all quite exciting because we can do that bit. However, there is still a big problem, and we discussed it pre-show last week. So let's look at that. It's what I think we, between us decided to term the MANGLE, which is the bit that stops you going straight from prospect to student. So in the middle of that whole process, we have got the whole offers and acceptance or rejection thing, along with the admissions and clearing type stuff, where the record can get handed over to a totally different disparate system that we have no control over whatsoever. And then associated with the checkboxes on the way in, I guess, you've got sort of loans and payments, and overseas students might need visas, and then the complication of remote students and short-term courses. And I think that's by no means a definitive list of all the complexities between, A, prospecting, and B, being a student. So that bit still, that really frightens me, that whole bit in the middle, because there are so many unknowns, and university to university, I'm going to guess that could change radically. There'll be some common factors, but I'm sure there's a lot of bits and pieces that have grown organically over time, and different tools. So I think that is going to be a really tough nut to crack. So I talked myself into this, and then I talked myself back out of it. But I'm kind of wondering whether prospecting stays on one side of the fence, and then look at what do you do post prospecting, the other side of the fence, which is normally where you join in. And in fact, you gave me an example last week, and it was to do with access to libraries. So maybe you want to talk me through the example that you gave and what you'd in fact like to see in the ideal perfect world.
Certainly that ideal world was an interesting conversation. So from our service desk team's point of view, at some point a student will physically be on campus with an ID card. Such things do still exist. Very simple example, they need to use that ID card to swipe through a gate to get into a library building, and that may not work. The number of reasons why that library card will not work, there's a mangle of reasons, if we can use the MANGLE term in that way. It could be because one hasn't completed a visa, they haven't done a finance thing, the card physically could be broken. We just don't know the reasons, and nor do the students. And even worse, I think, nor, I'm picturing the reception area in our library, nor will the poor reception staff know what to do. So what they will do is allow the student through on a temporary card, and they'll come and speak to us at the IT service desk. Then we've got the game of detective work, and we know certain things about the student. We have to look up a number of different student access screens. So we've cludged together, if you like, a form of a single record. We have a web page that pulls data from different streams, different sources, and that can give us a pretty good picture of how far a particular student has got down through the journey. But there's no way the student themselves can do that. So I think what Martin and I discussed was, wouldn't it be amazing if I could take my ID card and flash it somewhere to a reader, and it would say, oh, hi, for this ID card, this is what we know about you. These are the things that you've completed. These are the things that you haven't done. That's the ultimate shift left. Rather than the poor student having to, stand in a virtual or physical queue waiting to speak to us, they can understand immediately which part of their journey isn't completed. And that's quite often for us a visa or a financial reason. Then, of course, the challenge of the student is to find the right part of the university to speak to, but that's a different conversation. So I think that was our ideal scenario, wasn't it, Martin, that someone could effectively self-serve and understand with whom they needed to speak next.
And I think you actually nailed that in terms of shift left as well. That's what shift left is about. It's not about getting rid of the problem totally, which some people seem to interpret it as. It's about putting it into the right context and the right location. And if somebody can solve their own problem or find out what the problem is, in your example, so they're not solving it at that first instance, they're just saying, oh, right, it's a visa problem. And then presumably in the ideal world, they get pointed at the visa people.
Correct.
Who,
And actually, we never really took that part of it on. We said, oh, this will tell me what I need to do next. I suppose ideally, then you would be given detailed instruction on how to solve that yourself if you could. So yeah.
Yeah. Or even if it got passed to the visa help desk effectively, they would have the record of all of that student straight away, rather than them having to log on again and go through the whole process of who are you, all right, what's your matric number, or whatever else they have to answer.
Yeah.
So yeah, I could see how that would work. Are the business drivers then for that purely time-based from your perspective, or are there other business drivers for that particular example?
The one that immediately sprung to my mind there was student experience. Where universities are very concerned by how we're perceived by our students. And it can relax the student, I think, to know that, okay, I have a problem, it can't be resolved on Monday, but at least I know what that issue is. That slickness of one system that a student interacts with would be absolutely fantastic. The student experience is a big one for me. We were just talking pre-show about when is a resolved issue not actually resolved. So my service desk team could resolve an issue that the student has asked us, but the student's issue persists because we haven't fixed it. We've closed it by saying to the student, go away, go and speak to this other team. So that experience is one element.
And I think if I could just pick up on that as well, actually,
yeah.
in this whole world of social media and ratings and scorings and things like that, I'm assuming that every student will have the ability to log on and rate Aberdeen University for their experience of onboarding, for instance.
Yeah.
And that appears in some, I don't know where, because it's been so many years, but I'm assuming somewhere, much like anything else in the world, they can go look up all of those different facets of the university, and they want a 5-star review for everything, especially if they're paying, you know.
Yeah, they're the equivalent of TripAdvisor type scenarios, or student surveys, or higher education publication rankings, etc. Business driver that ties into that one. If you've not got an answer to something, how many people might you go off and ask the question of? IT, information hub, the finance team, the registry team. So actually, one simple business driver is you could potentially deflect multiple queries. Because we know that students ask the same question of 4 or 5 different business units. Quite how they manage to find
four of which are irrelevant, then presumably.
Correct. Yeah. So there's an awful lot of redundancy in there. So, and that is a live issue for us, that the students will ask the same question of multiple people to try and get an answer, because they're not quite sure to whom to speak. I wear a university lanyard when I'm on campus, of course, and it identifies me as university staff. From a student's perspective, they probably think that I know everything about the university and everybody. The university to them is one single entity. And they probably, and rightly so, Martin, think that they could ask a question of any staff member and receive a sensible, intelligent response. But you know yourself, that's really just not the case in the real world. I do not know the detail of how clearing or the finance governs under the bonnet would really work, like the general concept. But we do know that students think of the university as a single entity when they're joining us, and they don't really understand, again, nor should they, that we're really compartmentalized, fragmented, different operational business units. So from the student's point of view, there's a number of drivers there. From my own team, the service desk team's experience, it can be frustrating not being able to see how far, say, a student's visa progress has gone. So we can only help them yay far, and we do find it slightly frustrating that we have to then say, sorry, you will have to speak to another team. So just that empowerment for an individual staff member to be able to be all knowing and all seeing would be a decent business driver, but from an individual person's satisfaction about doing their job.
And I'm just thinking about that as I'm sitting here.
Yeah.
If you've got that single record, then that effectively is visible from wherever the student calls up. So
Yeah.
I just said 4 out of 5 calls are wasted. Well, they wouldn't be, because the first place they called would know, because regardless of whether they phoned up HR or whether they emailed IT, you would be able to see from those disparate locations the overall status of that student, regardless. So you would be the all-seeing, all-knowing person in the university, because everybody would. So
you'd think so, although it's sort of that model almost sort of implies a very, very broad first line support team that can pretty much encompass any aspect of that question, any student's question that they might ask at the beginning of a term, beginning of their journey with us. We're definitely quite far away from that. I guess it just even simply, instead of running with multiple systems, you just have fewer systems, fewer things to upgrade, fewer baskets to look after. So there are many, many drivers there. But just overall, being a bit slicker would be a great thing.
So I think you've probably already highlighted a bunch of other benefits. So we're getting ahead of ourselves, but you also mentioned single systems. And oddly enough, I'd have got a slide up there that said, should we be consolidating tools? And this is me, I kind of think round in circles, because ultimately you would like to think, I can use one tool for everything that is post that prospecting stage. The pre-prospecting stage, the tools are totally different. But post, you'd like to think that you can start amalgamating some of the things for, I don't know, accommodation or something like that, or HR or funding issues or things like that would have the same tool effectively running their processes for them. And I think that's an approach that a number of different people have started to take. But from my perspective, the more I think about it, the more challenges there are with that. Because what people tend to do is to take an IT service management tool and then apply it across all these different areas. And for me, there is a number of issues with doing that. One simple one is the licenses are pretty expensive for an IT service management tool because it's a powerful tool. So that by default means if you deploy it across everybody in the university, you're going to be spending a heck of a lot of money. The other element of that is an IT service management tool does, as you will know, instant problem change, configuration items. It's a complex beast. And a lot of these other areas will actually have relatively simple ticket chasing type of requirements and not need to do, problem management or understand impact analysis and urgency or anything like that in terms of the facilities, which are great within IT service management tools, but that's what they're designed for. They're not really designed for these other processes where things could be simple. So therefore, one of the stumbling blocks that I've seen happen in the past is you take the tool, you give it to HR or facilities or somebody else. In fact, I'll come back to facilities in a moment. We'll say HR or the student accommodation people, and they just don't understand what they're looking at because you're talking about incidents and problems and changes and things like that. And they're just, what is that? We just wanted to be able to track a ticket. So there's a complexity issue for other people outside of IT and understanding what the tool is. There is the cost issue. And then there's one, for instance, I just mentioned there, facilities. There are specific facilities management tools that do all sorts of things. Off the top of my head, one of them would be regular maintenance tasks. So they would regularly put out maintenance tasks, and some of those could be really complicated tasks with lots and lots of subtasks within them, and they refresh themselves automatically at a fairly frequent level. The service test tool would really need to be bent to do something like that. Whereas there are maintenance management tools that have been around for years that are really good. So in some cases, people will be very unhappy, and rightly so, about tool consolidation when they get loss of functionality. So, over time, a lot of these tools have become really, really rich in their functionality. Some of them will be specific to the higher education world as well. And therefore, to take a single tool, even if it's got ultimate flexibility in terms of process creation and workflow, it, to me, doesn't necessarily mean you can apply that to all the different areas within the university. So I'm talking myself into things and then talking myself out of them sort of as we go along. But almost to me, if there was a way to have multiple tools that had a similar back end and a similar admin module, and this is where I'm selling Freshworks again, because it has multiple different tools with very similar admin tools, then that to me sounds like a good example. So we can have effectively a cheaper product doing the what we call fresh desk stuff, which is the simpler ticket tracking type stuff, and then we can have more complex licenses for the service desk stuff. Now, where that falls over to some degree is those two tools don't have the same back end single record. They have a different single record. So, we would need to bridge that. But in terms of what you said earlier about managing all different tools, well, the management of the tools is almost identical. So the back end and the workflow creation and the creation of users accounts, they're all nearly identical. So, possibly there could be a mix and match of slightly different tools, and that might work. And within that, you may have exceptions to the rule where people are using a very, very specialist tool that is complicated and doesn't really fit into the whole scenario. There might be elements within facilities management where students are asking for something, changes of a light bulb in the accommodation or something. Maybe that's simple tracking that can be done. And then there's another element, which is way more complicated maintenance stuff, which sits separately. There's an option there to maybe look at things and break them down. And I also, I mentioned this to you, I think last week, have a secondary concern about that. Next slide. And that is the security question. Because the more I think about a single tool doing everything, the problem I have with that is that's a single database. And generically, most tools, if you then have an administration role for that tool, you probably have got access to pretty much anything on that database. And if that database contains confidential records about health or finance or anything else, the chances are that someone with an admin role can get into pretty much everything. And that's just not on. That can't happen. So it can't, if it's a single tool, you need to be able to partition the database securely and assign roles to those individual areas where the data is confidential. And whether that involves multiple instances of tools, that's one option. Data partitioning is another option. Multiple logons associated with any of those and synchronized. I guess that can be done through AD or something like that. But I think that is a big deal, and a big issue is the security side of things, which again brings me back to, well, actually, rather than having one tool, could we have a lot of tools that have got a similar back end, but that means that we can report across them all and pull out your data that you were talking about earlier on across the multiple systems if they've got similar back ends to them. because the problems occur when all the tools have got completely different back ends or work on different unique IDs. So one's working on email address, another's working on matriculation number as a unique ID. Total screw up. They're never going to be easy to report across. Database structures being totally different across different tools, different names for different fields. These are all where the problems lie. So if you can use tools which are very similar to one another, that reporting becomes easier. That's not me saying it's simple, but it's
easier.
It would be easier than previously stated, I think. But I do believe that is another question that we would need to sort of kick about and look at which systems really do need to be standalone completely, or have an administrator who is dedicated to that department, something like that. So I've seen it in the past where people are just blasé about, we'll have one system that does everything, and it doesn't work for so many different reasons that I think it's just something we need to have a think about. So let's transition away from the heavy security question. So back to the high-level generic model. I don't think we were ever going to be answering loads of questions today, but if you could ask questions of other people in the same environment, what sort of questions would you be asking other people who tried to go down this journey about perceived benefits or perceived challenges?
I think and indeed the successes, I'd like to know what people have succeeded in doing, and also where they completely hit a brick wall. I think going back to the security question is a good one, because as you were talking, part of my brain is thinking, oh, that's quite easy. You just put a layer of security on that. Martin can see everything, Iain can only see a subset, but that very quickly grows arms and legs, and then you've suddenly got someone who's responsible for ensuring that that's always kept up to date. And we know ourselves that we've had systems where the housekeeping on security layers is tricky and not straightforward. That's certainly one of the challenges. One of the benefits, though, what resonated with me, Martin, is we use Freshservice as our ITSM tool and Freshdesk Messaging as our chat tool. And the back ends for those, both of which I'm responsible for, are very similar. So as an administrator or overseer, myself and my team can look at the back end and manipulate them very similarly. So learn one, learn them all. So that's definitely a huge benefit to us.
And the front ends look the same as well, don't they? So
they can do, which does help to an extent. The ambition to do it is definitely there, but you used the word organic earlier on, and that's really spot on. A lot of our systems certainly are organic. We've added as needs have arisen, or as volumes and demands have changed. You don't stop, wipe the slate clean, and start building afresh. We just don't have that luxury. To make this work, I would almost envisage a fictional brand new university where you built absolutely everything from scratch, and it was easy because then everything could tie together right from the off. We still have legacy systems and legacy bits of code that I think we've more or less weeded out from staff members who did amazing work, but tied things together with coding, 20 years ago. You occasionally still hear that, oh, that was a John thing, because there was a little bit of code that did that and passed data to there. And unpicking that took us about 5 years after somebody retired. So
yeah, I've definitely seen that 100 times. And one of the things that the other benefits, of course, of having similar backends is, and from the same supplier, is you're eliminating the whole upgrades and interfaces issue, which is massive, especially if you had legacy systems and things in there. But I've seen legacy systems which are still running on ancient versions of Windows because they won't run on anything else, and people can't get rid of them.
I've never heard of such a thing at the University of Aberdeen.
Okay, I haven't seen it at Aberdeen, but
We
I've
have,
seen
don't
it.
worry.
Right, it happens all the time. Upgrades to databases, to backends, to operating systems, to all these sort of things. Suddenly, things that did work yesterday don't work today, and it's always it wasn't me, Governor. I didn't do anything. So the more of that you can eliminate, then definitely the better. I'm still on the fence about how everything could sit together, and what is the best solution. So I think I have the similar questions to you, which is, well, what have other people done that was great? What have they done that didn't work at all? And where are I know there are lots of vendor stories out there where people have said we can do everything, and it turns out actually that they can't at all. They're bending stuff and fiddling it. So
I think one of the sorry to interrupt, Martin. When you go.
No, I wouldn't want to be that person. I mean, I'm sure I could produce some sort of demo that would appear to do everything with smoke and mirrors, and it'll look marvelous, but it will never work, without cajoling at best. So I think it's a sort of stepped approach. I don't know what the big steps are. So I think one of the things that I would like to ask as a question in terms of business benefits were, can you rank 1 to 5 the top business benefits from consolidated records in different areas? So, give me those top benefits, and then that gives you something to aim for, and then you can maybe have a 5-year time scale whereby you're knocking these off eventually, but you have a list of top 5 that we would really, really be brilliant to be able to do this. Well, okay, let's try and crack that nut first, and then think about the other stuff later.
Yeah, and my university is over 525 years old. I suppose we could imagine we'll be around for another 525 years at least. Maybe we put in a 25-year plan that moves us all to a single system, but who knows what will happen in 25 years. I think going back to your question, though, for me, it's about, with my own arena, it's about scope. What can we affect that's useful and moves us forward in the here and now? And with our ITSM tool, Freshservice, we started off with about 150 IT staff, 30 or so finance staff, and 10, 15 e-learning staff, so 3 different business units. So in total, just shy of 200 agents using the tool and sharing records between us, sharing student issues. We've grown that now to incorporate multiple other teams, and we have 350 agents across 10, 11 different operational units of the university using our ITSM tool. And that for a service desk team is pretty handy, because we now can, while we don't have a unified record per se, at least when someone asks us a query, Martin, we can seamlessly or relatively seamlessly pass it to another part of the university that can help. So there's small wins that we have managed to make, but that also comes at the cost that you described earlier, both the financial cost of a team using an ITSM tool simply for inquiry management and for that confusion. Our ITSM tool for our service is fantastic. We love it to bits, plug, because it does what we need in IT. It does change, it does incident, it does problem, etc., etc. But those things are irrelevant, redundant. There's too many Swiss Army knife options for other parts. However, to fix the problem of being able to improve that student experience and the call passing between the teams, it makes perfect sense for now to bring those guys in. But I think one of the discussions that we did have last week was, should the IT department stick with the ITSM tool from our vendor and perhaps investigate using a more stripped down but inquiry focused tool for our sort of partner colleagues? And that's definitely something on our radar to discuss with our account executives if they're bearing it, they're listening in. to try and be a bit more sensible about it. But I'm also very acutely aware that that's us focusing in quite narrowly on a smallish subset of a vast university ecosystem. But you do what you can do, and you try to keep the conversations going generally about the broader picture. One thing that we haven't touched on though, Martin, is the use of plugins and marketplace apps that can help to get system A talking to system B. And certainly the tool that we use has a number of apps, and we do have some capacity to talk to Jira, Microsoft Dynamics, and other tools. And that can help a little bit. We're not doing a lot of that right at this moment in time. And we've also brought in the orchestration server, which we've got in our test environment now. And that potentially also allows us a little bit more automation and seamless transition. So there are things that we can do, but I'm very aware that they're kind of the ones that are in my direct scope, if you see what I mean. And as a service desk manager, yes, of course, I talk to our IT director, but then you've got to go to our digital strategy committee. You've got to go right across the entire university ecosystem, and it's a huge piece of work. Sounds dead easy in practice. Say, let's just have one ecosystem, but my goodness, I think it would be the end of my career before any of this. It wouldn't cause the end of the career, but I think the time taken to get there, well, it could do. But yeah, I love this question because it just sounds like a really simple, it's a no-brainer. We have one data source, set of data sources that everybody can access, but when you really, we've been digging into some of the problems, it's been complex, doesn't even start to describe it, I think. And we haven't even touched the fact that we as service desks deal with our staff data too. So we're not purely student focused. We also service our academic, research, and professional services staff. So they've also got to be part of that mix, and that's a different set of data again.
Yeah.
So
and a different set of requirements as well.
Mm-hmm.
They will be asking totally different questions and expect totally different types of response as well. So that becomes another layer to the whole complicated cake, I suppose.
And then also if you were to go down that route of a single ecosystem, it's not just a big commitment to get there, but it's a big long-term commitment. You're then embedded. Your entire business model is founded on one ecosystem, and there's a risk inherent in that also, I think.
Yeah, that's the flip side of the coin, isn't it? So put all your eggs in one basket, and the basket goes down, you're in trouble.
Aye. It's an uncertain world out there, so we don't know.
This is true. Well, thank you for joining me today, Ian. No doubt we'll join again. If you want to hang out in the green room for just 1 minute, I'm going to close off for today, and we can continue our chat briefly before everybody goes home for the weekend. But thanks for joining me. I'm going to transition, and you're going to disappear. See you later, Ian. Bye. Okay, guys, a very brief, I guess, introduction to what's coming next. I've got a couple of extra special guests coming over the next couple of weeks. First of all, Chris Pope. Some people may know him from ServiceNow, now at Chief Innovation Officer at New Rocket, and Claire Agiter, who is continuously voted one of the most influential people in ITSM across the whole of the UK. So Chris and Claire are coming up at later episodes of the IT show. But for tonight, that is it. Goodbye. Thank you for joining. See you later. Cheerio.